Welcome to T21 Mom.
Hi, friends. Thanks for tuning in to the T21 Mom podcast, where we share heartfelt personal stories and experiences and have important conversations with experts and specialists. I'm Mary, mom to Ainsley, who rocks an extra chromosome along with a slice of autism. And this is episode 137. Today, we're diving into what I think is a really emotional story. If you had a birth diagnosis, how was it delivered to you? Were you alone? Our guest today, Melissa Miller, is here to share her own diagnosis story, which had a heartbreaking start. Just 10 years ago, the doctor stood at the door, told her the news, and said no one would judge her if she left her baby at the hospital. Can you imagine that? Sadly, I'm still hearing stories like this today, and it's hard to believe. But Melissa's story didn't end there. She turned this moment of loneliness and negativity into something truly powerful. Let's hear how she did it. Let's go have a listen. Today on the T21 Mom podcast, we are continuing our Down Syndrome Diaries, where we are sharing diagnosis stories. And with me today is Melissa Miller. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Now, would you like to share a little bit about you and your family before we get started?
Sure, I am 44. I am a stay-at-home mom. I have a small business, and I also do volunteer as a blog writer and then on a recovery team. And I have 4 children from the ages 22 down to 3. And I live in rural Ohio. It's a little village called Old Fort. So that's a little bit about me.
And you said you're part of a recovery team. What is that?
Yes,
As your work?
for addiction, a
I was
recovery
wondering if that's what it was. Okay.
team. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, good for you. Okay, that's awesome. Now, you told me, like, because we were chatting back and forth before today, that during your pregnancy, you had all the testing done. Which test did you do? Like, did you do the nip test, or was it just the blood tests, or what did you?
It was the non-invasive prenatal testing. So I had the blood work done. And then also it was the first time I ever had the 3D ultrasound, but they were looking for abnormalities and, soft markers because I was 34 at the time and nothing was found. Everything went okay. So yeah, I just had those tests done.
So on the nip test, that's really interesting. So because I know it's just a screening, it's not a diagnostic test, so it's not
Right.
100% accurate. But what don't they give you your odds? I didn't have that, and so it's only based on what I've heard and read, but did they give you odds? I guess yours was low or none?
If they did, I didn't retain that knowledge. I know that this was my 3rd pregnancy, and I just know that they did extra screenings because they said of my age. I also had low iron, so I had to take extra iron. I know sometimes there's some studies that are out there that talk about does low iron add to, the chance of having a child born with Down syndrome. But besides that, it was just the extra screening that they went through. So there was no odds that were brought to me, at least not to my attention.
Oh, that's so interesting. 'Cause, yeah, that obviously it didn't show up. So it shows that it's not always totally accurate. It's
Right.
close,
Right.
but
Right.
not accurate. I think you might be the first person that I've heard of where they've had that screening and obviously came back negative, but still had a
Wow.
child with Down syndrome.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I know
I
I
mean,
had to travel further to go to a specialist to make sure that nothing was wrong with my son.
wow. I mean, obviously only for your own curiosity, but I think you're definitely a rarity. I mean, I'm sure it does happen because it is just a screening, but
Right.
I have not heard of any other T21 moms like you, like, that have had that test and where it came back
And I didn't even know
negative.
that. I mean, I've never asked any other fellow mom that question.
I
So,
yeah,
interesting.
I'm yeah, you should, if you're in some different groups, just to kinda poke around a little bit because I'm pretty I mean, there might be 1 or 2 others, but I think it would be very rare, I'm pretty sure. So that's really interesting. Because when you said you had done all the testing, I go, like, did she actually do the NIP test? Because I thought, that would have told you right then and there, but obviously in your
Yeah.
case, it didn't. So and that's very interesting about the iron. I hadn't really heard that before. So, they're still trying to figure out what even causes Down syndrome, like, you know, why we get our kids. So,
Right. Right. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So, but that's so interesting. Now, Hunter is obviously your son with Down syndrome. And how was your pregnancy? Like, I mean, 34 is not old. And,
No.
did you have any complications? Was it a relatively easy pregnancy? Because
Well,
was he your fourth child?
this is my
Or
third
third?
child.
Third, sorry. Yeah.
It was different. There was something different about this pregnancy. I first of all lived far away from like my family. So in that aspect it was different that way. Like I didn't have my mom right down the street to, help me with things or if I was feeling lonely or something. But I had with gestational diabetes, but I had already had that. I had low iron, so I had to take those nasty iron pills. But I mean, I was on a good diet. I was gaining weight good. The feeling, there was just a different feeling with this one. So, and I know that I had more fatigue when I was pregnant with Hunter. Things made me more tired out. And yeah, like 34 is not old at all. Um, so I mean, I was doing things, I was doing like yoga and trying to stay active, but it took a lot.
Hmm. Well, you had two other kids. I mean, well, I don't know the ages of the other two. The oldest you said is 22 now. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So we're going back 10 years. So, yeah, you had two other kids, that you're dealing with. So of course, it's going to make you tired. Right. And then
Right.
plus, growing a human it's a lot of work and it
Good
is hard.
job.
It does make us tired. Yeah. It's a big job. That's right. Now you had Hunter, you had him a little bit early at 34 weeks, which is get kind of still on the early side, I think. And you had to have an emergency C-section. Like, did you get a chance to hold him?
No, it did not. I was with that when I went into labor. First of all, I was in denial, and I was saying, There's no way. It's way too early, way too early."
Hmm.
And a friend of mine was like, "No, you need to go. I think you're really in labor." By the time I finally got to the hospital, I was already dilated, and they said he was coming. And so I'm not even for sure. Like I feel like I was knocked out pretty quickly. And I honestly do not remember much
Hmm.
about what happened next. I just know I was in pain and laying on, the stretcher and they were telling me to hold him in. And I'm like, what? And then I was, and then they gave me my medicine and just, I wasn't really, I don't even remember the C-section itself. Like, I don't remember any images. None of that. I do
Wow.
remember when I had him, I couldn't hear him cry. And
Hmm.
and that was the thought in my head, like, why can't I hear my baby cry? But I couldn't see him. So
Hmm.
I don't know if I don't know how that was. I don't know what happened.
And were your first two kids, were they full term?
Yes. Yes, they were.
Okay.
They were after.
So
They were
that
overdue.
they were overbaked. So,
Yeah.
so this was a bit of an anomaly. And so why did you end up having to have a C-section?
There were complications. So during that time, so that was the doctor had already said that they were going to do a C-section. So I was already supposed to be scheduled for one, but we
Oh, I
didn't.
see.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was already
Okay.
scheduled. So that's why it had to be like an emergency C-section.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. It was scheduled, but obviously not at 34 weeks. So, and
Yeah.
uh, how much did he weigh?
He
How
was
big was
5'6". So he was just above the preemie weight.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, fine. Yeah. And our kiddos tend to be on the smaller side anyways, even at full term. I mean, my daughter was 9'1". She was beyond
Oh my
like the
goodness.
typical. I know. And I'm very thankful I ended up having a C-section. I wanted to
Yeah.
try, but when they told me she was 9'1", I thought, okay, thank goodness that I had a
Yeah.
C-section. But, and mine was an emergency one, like, kinda like yourself, but obviously for very different reasons, and, I was awake for it all, and I could remember all of it, so,
Oh
and
wow.
I'm sure that's difficult where you can't really remember that moment when your child's born, and
Yeah.
like you, I do remember my daughter, she didn't cry right away either. I mean, we all
Okay.
knew that she had Down syndrome, but it was kinda scary because I'm thinking, aren't babies supposed to
Yeah.
cry when they're
Yeah.
first born? Right? Yeah, so I'm sure that caused you some anxiety. Now, because he was early, obviously, he's 8 or yeah, 6 how many? 6 weeks early? Is that right? Yeah, 6 weeks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had to whisk him off to the NICU. I mean, what did that feel like? Because, I mean, you're obviously in a bit of a daze. You said from the C-section, you didn't even get a chance to hold him. Do you remember even seeing him?
No. No. When I was waking up in the recovery room, like my family was still on their way. So I didn't have anybody in there to answer any of my questions. But I was trying to come to. And then the nurse did come in and bring Hunter to me. And I just remember he was all swaddled, like he was so little and he was just like
Yeah.
swaddled up. He did not look to be like there was anything amiss. And I was just holding him and he was sleeping. Like he didn't seem hungry right away, which, my other 2 I was used to, they're hungry, they're ready to eat. So when I went to try to feed him, he wasn't wanting like to latch on or anything. So
Mhm.
the nurse noticed that he was having some difficulties. And I think at that moment, I think is when my mom was coming in and she said, well, you have, visitors. And so she took Hunter aside, um, because I just thought, well, maybe he's going to need some help latching on or something. But what the problem was that he couldn't breathe and swallow at the same time. Like he didn't know how to
Mhm.
suckle, which is a very it's a very natural instinct, but he didn't have that skill. So that's when she took him but I didn't realize it at that time. I just thought, oh, he's not, he's
Yeah.
gonna need more help. But since family members were coming in, the nurse just had him and they all got to see him, but nobody was able to like hold him yet because she took him back to like I think she knew something was going on. She just didn't want to say anything yet.
Ah, okay. So because he wasn't latching, that kind of maybe tweaked it for the nurse that maybe there was something more going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And I
I mean,
guess
they see
when they took him back there is when they noticed that he could not, breathe and swallow at the same time.
wow, yeah, because like, how do they even figure that out? I mean, obviously, they see so many babies, so they kind of, I guess, they know what to expect, I guess,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
they realize that there was something different about him. So they take him back to the NICU, and then what happened after that? So, I mean, this is obviously only a short while after he's been born, I'm assuming, and
Yeah.
you've barely had a chance to see and meet your new baby, and they take him back
Yeah.
to the NICU, and then what happened from there? Because obviously,
obviously he wasn't feeding, so that's obviously something of concern. And
Mhm.
and then what happened from there?
Well, they had let me know that he had slight jaundice, and so he was gonna have to be under a lamp in the NICU. So he was gone for a while. In fact, my family who was there, they're like, okay, well, we're gonna leave, let you rest and everything. And I called back to the nurses to find out, where my baby was because it had been a long time. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this is long enough. I want to see my baby. And I just got a message. They were like, doctor will be coming in to see you. And I'm like, okay. So,
And did that make you nervous or anxious? Did you think that seemed out of the norm, or you
not,
just thought that was just kind of par for the course at that point?
yeah, because it was a new hospital. I'd never been to this hospital before. So I just thought maybe it just was a little different.
And so, about how long after was it that the doctor came to see you? Was this all on the same day, or was
Oh,
it
it's
the
all the
next
same
day, or
day. This was like, you know, hours after Hunter had been born because I went into labor overnight. So
Mm,
in the middle of the night, like 2 o'clock in the morning is when I actually had him. So
okay.
that's why in the morning. So, family had come and then they left. And so it'd been, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 hours after he had
Mhm.
been born.
Okay. And so the doctor comes in to see you, and then what happened from there? Like, what did the doctor say anything to you, or what did he tell you?
Well, the doctor and a nurse walked in and they just stood at the door. Like the nurse was standing behind the doctor, and
Mhm.
this doctor had never seen him before. And he just rattled on to say, your son or your baby has trisomy 21, and just started talking all this medical language to me. And immediately, like, my heart started pounding. And I thought he was trying to tell me that he died. I'm like, is he dead? Because I don't understand what you're saying to me. And he did not have very good bedside manner at all. Horrible, horrible. But he just said, we're checking for heart conditions because that's common, and just kind of went over this list and started telling me, okay, so when I was called in to examine your baby, and I noticed that there was a line that went across his hand, and I'm still like, he's talking to me like this, but I'm still not receiving what he's saying, I'm still like,
Mhm.
what's wrong with
Mhm.
my baby? Gosh, it was just such a confusing time.
And he's just
And it
standing
was
at
like
the
a
doorway?
yeah,
Like, did
yeah.
he even cut?
He never came near me. No, no, definitely not. I don't know if he did that with the, cooties to get him or not. It felt really, I don't know, just very
That
cold.
is cold and callous, really, to be if you're gonna give that kinda news, at least, be in somewhat close proximity, not be at the door, because that's so impersonal.
Yeah. And
That's
then the nurse behind him,
terrible.
like, I don't know what her function was. I don't know what she was even there for.
His
But
his
yeah,
moral support.
I evidently. But I'm starting to cry. And then he said, I think he finally did say Down syndrome, that my
Because
son had Down syndrome.
'Cause I'm willing to
And
bet a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know who is not in our world, would not necessarily know what trisomy 21 is, which is the
right.
medical term. So but everyone knows what Down syndrome is.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's so brutal how he's telling you that. Like, we're all just lay people. We're not doctors or medical professionals, so we don't know all that jargon. I mean, we
Right.
know it now because that's our life, but when you've just had a baby, you're not expecting that, and then the doctor gives you that news that way is just brutal, really, for
Yeah.
a lack of any other word.
Yeah.
That's horrible. I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Like, and you're by yourself, right? Because all your family has left at this point?
Yeah, well, at this point, his biological dad was in the room with me, and he's already a mess. He's already sobbing, crying, like, we're both getting the news. Like, what? It was just such a shock. And then what he said next was even worse than the diagnosis, was he told me not to expect much. He said he said your child is not going to accomplish the same things that a normal child is going to accomplish. He said just don't expect much, is what he said to me. So I thought he was going to be a vegetable. Honestly, that's really what I thought. I thought my son was a vegetable and he was not going to be able to do anything. He gave me a death sentence.
Yeah. I'm so stunned. This is horrible. And I recently chatted with another mom where the doctor said, you can just leave him here. You wouldn't be judged for that. And that was
Well, that's what he
in
said to
24.
me.
Ye-
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
that's what he said to
that's
me.
horrible. And so he's telling you all this medical jargon, finally says Down syndrome. Oh, and by the way, your child isn't really going to amount to anything,
Yeah.
is
Well,
essentially
yeah,
all.
yeah. He said,
Like
don't
that.
expect much. And then he said, you are going to, you're going to be discharged. We're going to keep Hunter for observation. Or he didn't use his name. He said, we're going to keep your baby for observation. And then he said, and when you get discharged, if you do not come back to the hospital, nobody is going to judge you. And that's when I didn't understand what he was saying. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, no, there will be no judgment if you leave your child behind. And then I got mad. And I told him that I fell in love with him when he looked like a kidney bean. I'm not leaving my child. And then he left the room because I was mad. I was really it just instantly made my blood boil.
I I just can't believe this is still happening. That doctors, medical professionals seem to be okay with giving that kind of message, that kind of information, that it's okay to just leave your baby here with Down
Mhm.
syndrome. Nobody's going to judge you. It it's so scary that that is still happening because what Hunter's about 10?
Yeah, so that was in 2014.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this other mom, it was also 2014 as well. Like, I don't it just blows me away that this is still happening. I can't believe that this is even allowed
Yeah.
to happen, and that is so heartbreaking for you as a mom because you're just been given so much misinformation and your baby's not even a day old.
Yeah.
And doctor is making all these predictions about your child who is, like I said, not even 24 hours old. They are not going to make those predictions for anyone else's child.
Oh, right. No, no. Yeah, definitely not. It's going to be opposite.
Right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
so how did that news affect you? Like, how did that make you feel? Like, I know you said you got mad, but at the same time, like, what are you thinking, feeling, questioning? Like, what a
I
traumatic
was,
time, really.
yeah, I was devastated. I really was. I was really devastated. I feel like it took any of the joy of having given birth out. And then I had to tell my family. And I didn't. I didn't at first. I don't know. I think I just needed it to soak in, maybe. Because it took a few days for me to
Mhm.
open up and finally tell like my mom the news, because I guess I didn't know even what to do with it. And I wasn't given any welcome to a new world of Down syndrome welcome
Mhm.
package or anything. I mean, it took it. I felt like alone. I felt like I was the only person. the only mom that just gave birth to a child with Down syndrome. That's how I felt like.
That makes me just so sad. Like, honestly, how devastating and horrible that you had to go through that, that there was zero supports for you. Like, did they even give you any information or anything? Because, I mean, he's only a day
Uh,
old and and he has
every
to stay there for a few days, but
Yeah, yeah. So he stayed there and I was, like the house, they call it the house mom or house parent because I had to I got to stay on the same floor, but I had to, go down and to the cafeteria when it was time to eat, those kinds of things. And they wouldn't take him out of the NICU. So I had to, when I wanted to visit my baby, I had to do it in a room with other nurses and other babies. And it just was very impersonal. I just couldn't wait to get out of there and get him out of
Mhm.
there. But I do know one nurse that was in the nursery. She did tell me something that hit home. She said, she's like, don't look at the labels here. Don't look at what he's been diagnosed with. She's like, he's still a baby. He still needs love. He still needs food and he still needs you. So that
Mhm.
did help me. That one person at least got to say something that kind of calmed me down and then made me refocus. You're right. I'm his mom. He still needs me. And
Mhm.
even though I have no idea what life is going to be like, he still is a baby, he still
Mhm.
needs his mom. So that nurse did help when she said that. That definitely helped a lot.
Oh, that's so wonderful that at least there was one person during that really traumatic time, and that's what I always tell, like, new parents too who've just received a diagnosis, that all babies, like you just said, they all need to be fed, they all need to be loved, they all need to be changed, they need to be held. Like, all
Yeah.
babies need that,
Yeah.
diagnosis or not. And and thankfully that nurse realized that and said, "He's still a baby. He needs all of these things.
Yeah.
Forget about the diagnosis," right? So that's just so really kind of heartbreaking to have to go through that. Like, this sounds like something from that should have happened like decades and decades ago,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
I mean, and that was one doctor's opinion. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
it was his opinion saying that my child is not going to amount to much. So yeah, that's still out there.
Yeah, and other parents like yourself are still hearing that information. I don't I mean, I'd like to think that it's changing. I think it is a little bit, but it just feels it's like in slow motion trying to change that mindset and have that doctor realize that, like you said, he didn't even say his name, right? So he doesn't want to get
Right.
like intimate, personal with the child. He just referred to him as your baby, not his name. And, I just hope that this is getting better, but that's only 10 years ago. That is not that long ago for that to
Yeah.
still be happening. And I mean, obviously, that was so traumatic and devastating the way you received that news. Like, I can't even imagine what that was like. And the doctor making such, I think, false predictions for your
Mhm.
son.
Yeah.
But, did he make any other sort of, well, I think you kind of touched on it, kind of sad predictions for Hunter, or
Well,
did he
I
tell
think
you
that
anything else?
don't expect much. He just told me what he couldn't accomplish, that Hunter was not going to be able to accomplish the things that his peers will be able to do.
Yeah, that's terrible. Now, Hunter's in the NICU, and so how long did he have to stay in the NICU before he could come home?
5 days.
Okay, so not too long, even for well, technically a preemie, I guess. That's
Yeah,
not
he was
too long.
just
I guess he was just sorry.
Yeah, he was just above the preemie weight, so he was a little tight.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, I guess because they have to go over a certain weight, I think, before they can release them home. So that's good. So 5 days isn't too bad. That's great. And but while he's in the hospital, you still have to see these doctors and these nurses when you go
Yeah.
to the NICU to, to see your baby, like medical staff who have, I hate to say it, but who seem to have little value for your son. What was that like?
Well, luckily, I never saw that specialist again. Yeah. But it was there was nobody to talk to.
Hmm.
I remember I was dealing with pain because I just had a C-section, and I know one of the nurses that was in the nursery was like, "You need to you" she was just like, "You need to start walking more, and I don't wanna see you sitting down and trying to take it easy." She's like, "You need to walk." And I'm
Yeah.
just like, "I know. It still hurts."
Yeah.
I mean, I was able to at least walk down there to come and visit him. That was the only thing I could do. I felt like I was, visiting my baby in baby jail because it was too impersonal, definitely too impersonal.
Wow. It's really heartbreaking to hear that was Hunter's entry into the world, right? That
Yeah.
was it wasn't joyous. It wasn't a celebration. It was just essentially for you isolation. It was negative. None of the doctors, I'm sure, said congratulations or anything along those lines to you because they were
Right.
essentially negative about him and his diagnosis.
Yeah.
That's that's hard. Now, the doctor was, kind of, you know, basically saying Hunter's not going to do any of these things. But maybe you can share what some of these things Hunter is doing that the doctor said he wasn't going to do.
Yes. Well, first of all, my child has an amazing personality. Doctor forgot to mention that. He is He loves laughing. He loves kind of even he likes to pick at you until you wrestle him to the ground. Like he likes to play. Yeah, he's a stinker. He loves to play ball. He loves bouncing balls. He's not the best at passing the ball, but he will throw it to you if you start playing like catch back and forth. He normally wants to just keep the ball for himself. Mm, Yeah. So, I mean, he loves laughing. He likes to be tickled. He likes Paw Patrol, Mickey Mouse. He likes to play with his toys. So there's a lot of things that doctor said that isn't true. I mean, yeah, maybe my son isn't going to be able to do things that my other children have done. Maybe he's not going to
Mhm.
graduate with honors or go to college, but he is going to be the best version of himself. Like he is going to be who he's meant to be. So that's what I'll say to that doctor.
Yes. Oh, I love that. He's going to be the person he was meant to be. And I think that those medical staff totally forgot that.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
he's going to be who he's meant to be. And the way you just described him just sounds like any other kid.
Yeah. Yeah. He
Paw
gets into
Patrol,
trouble.
Mickey Mouse, gets into trouble, probably fights with his siblings, you know,
Yeah.
like just like any other.
Kid. Are you I mean, your
Diagnosis experience, I think, is rather devastating. I think the way you were told it and the way the medical staff were with you. But
Mm.
looking back, do you think it was better for you to have a birth diagnosis, or do you think you would have preferred a prenatal diagnosis?
Oh man. I don't know. I'm glad it was after I had him,
Hmm.
but I just wish it had been more informative than just like handing down a scent. I think the doctor was looking at the burden, like the burden of this child is going to be too much. So yeah, like you said, I think that that part was left out.
Mhm. Mhm. And you've had another child since Hunter.
Yes.
I so did you do all the testing
Oh yeah.
for that child too? But, like, you did all the testing for Hunter and you still had a birth diagnosis.
Yeah. I mean, it was still,
So
I just did the same testing. It just, because I didn't want to do the invasive. There's
right,
just too
like
much of a chance.
yeah, like an amnio or what have you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, because I can understand parents wanting to know after having a child with Down syndrome. For
Mhm.
most, it's probably not gonna necessarily change anything, but also just wanting to know. So, yeah, I can appreciate that, but it's kind of funny and, well, in sort of a weird way because you had all the screening with Hunter and it still didn't tell you anything,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. You can even tell, you can even tell he had Down syndrome. He didn't look, I mean, now that he's older, you can see it more in his eyes, and the slanting of his eyes and the way his face is shaped. But when he was, first born, he was just like the pudgy little baby. And yeah, the only thing I could see was the one line that goes straight across his one hand. That is the only marker that was noticeable at all.
wow. I mean, I have heard that. It doesn't seem super common, but I have heard that that's often our babies. 'Cause and I mean, and he was a C-section, like, often if it's a natural delivery, because 'cause they're all squished up anyways, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just a lot harder to tell, but usually when they come out as a C-section, they're a little bit more kind of perfect looking, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm surprised that didn't see that, and I had one mom, she said it was the tone that really like, her child's muscle tone that really alerted the staff that there was a
Mm.
chance for that because yeah, so yeah, I guess that could make it challenging if there isn't necessarily the obvious signs to see. Like, we all know what Down syndrome looks like. So, but, sometimes it's really hard to tell when they're
Yeah.
born. So, which was obviously
Yeah.
the case for Hunter. Yeah. Wow. Now, what advice do you have for other parents who've just received either a prenatal or a birth diagnosis of Down syndrome for their child? Hopefully, if it's a birth diagnosis, it wasn't anything like yours, but because
Yeah.
did anybody point you in the right direction, provide you with anything, or were you kinda left to your own devices?
After I left the hospital and told a few people, that I knew that lived around there, I was able to get linked up with early intervention and Healthy Start. So they
Oh,
were
good.
amazing because they came with the book and the,
Mhm.
oh, yay, he's bored. Welcome. Welcome to this world, Hunter. They made it, like of a celebration. And so that
Nice.
warmed my heart up and that helped me too, because, you know, I guess just the way that everything happened, it felt like we hadn't bonded yet. Those first
Mhm.
5 days we had not bonded. So
Mm.
it took a little bit longer, once I got home, I'm like, man, we need to like just work on that, that relationship. Even though he's just a little baby, but I guess it had tainted the way I looked at him because I was just like, you know, what's going to happen? I mean, it's like I thought he was
Mhm.
going to be a vegetable. The doctor pretty much told me not to expect much. So I really thought he was going to be a vegetable. And boy, he proved me wrong by the time he turned one. He
That's
proved
aw
me wrong.
that
Or he
that
proved the doctor
it's
wrong.
so yes, that's so awesome. And so what would you tell a new parent that's just learned that their child has Down syndrome?
That your child is a blessing no matter what they look like on the ultrasound and what they look like when they're born. Your baby is still a blessing and you just watch.
Ah,
You'll
yes, you just watch. I love it. You're 10 years in with Hunter and obviously didn't leave Hunter at the hospital as the doctor suggested. But what has he taught you?
Oh, not to judge a book by its cover, not to assume that, my son is nonverbal, but I know his personality shows, and I know he understands a lot more than anybody gives him credit for. And he's teaching me right now. I mean, it's every day, honestly.
Mhm.
And and I'm hopeful for the future. We're going to be doing some more different therapies coming up and just some different out of the box things, like I want to give him a shot. Like I want to give him the world to see what is going to click for him.
Mm.
Like I said, like he's nonverbal, but I feel like he wants to talk to me. I know he wants to say something. I just need to give him the tools to unlock that. So
Oh, yes, that's amazing, and oh, yes, I'm sure, like, I always love asking parents that question because and everyone always says something slightly different, but I love hearing what our kids teach us because I think they are such wonderful teachers, and I think for many of us, they help give us a different perspective on the world and
oh,
kind of,
absolutely. Yeah.
what's important and to slow down a little bit because, I mean, I only have the one child, but everything happens so fast when you have a typical child. Like all the milestones are, you know, they've done this, and this. Well, we're still waiting often for our kids to hit
Yeah.
those milestones. So, Melissa, is there anything else that you would like to share about your journey and Hunter?
To other parents to get connected with other parents like you. Find your tribe, find your people. Because, I mean, to be honest, my son has dual diagnosis. So even
Mhm.
in just the Down syndrome community, there wasn't as much connection because I still felt like my son's still behind. Like my son's still not doing these things and he's not talking. So you need to find your people, okay? And it's gonna help a lot because you're not alone. Although you feel like it, you are not alone. And this journey it can be rough and it can be really overwhelming sometimes, but you're gonna overcome it and be the best advocate for your child and see that there is so much more to life than just a diagnosis. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes. Find your people, find your tribe because
Mhm.
they are going to carry you during those hard days because we all have those hard days,
Yeah,
typical or not typical child, right? But
right.
I think, like you said, sometimes it's a little bit more overwhelming when we have a child with a little bit extra, but you find those people who know exactly what you're dealing with
What's
and
the dealing with, right? Yeah.
and they know what you need. And yes, and that's what I have found. Like my daughter's 11, so close in age to Hunter. And it's made such a huge difference for me on this journey to find those people and find those who get me and
Yeah.
and understand my child. And yeah, it just makes it so much easier. And
Yes.
for me personally, I'm just so thankful to all the parents who've gone ahead. Like we have Facebook and Instagram now. You know, that's not that old, all that stuff. So all those parents that were before us who didn't have that, you know, I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for them and that they're paving the way. And it, I'm sure, was so much harder to find your people back then. But you're right, find your tribe.
Yes.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. And I think it sounds like it's really like a triumphant story overcoming, the devastation, I think, initially of the way the whole diagnosis was handled and that grief, I'm sure. I mean, we all deal with that, but yours just like it just sounds so, it was so terrible at the time. And because you had all the
Yeah.
screening, so you certainly weren't expecting anything,
Right.
except a typical child, really. And then you get that blow and it wasn't very helpful with how the doctors treated you, but it sounds like you've overcome that negativity and that devastation in the beginning of Hunter's life.
Yes. Yeah. Not looking back.
Yes, that's a good plan. Just look forward. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I was really saddened to hear how Melissa received Hunter's diagnosis. First, she has a preemie baby that she's worried about, but she had all the testing done, including the NIP test. So she was certainly not expecting anything out of the ordinary for her new baby. And how the doctor delivered the news at the doorway. He couldn't even come into her room to tell her some life-changing news. Here are some of my takeaways. Why is a medical professional predicting the future of a newborn baby with Down syndrome? They certainly don't do that for typical babies. Honestly, there should be a course on bedside manner in medical school because I keep hearing these stories over and over and over again, and they just shouldn't be happening. Number 2, this is not the first time that I've heard this, but I still find it shocking that this is even still happening, that the doctor told Melissa she wouldn't be judged for leaving her baby at the hospital. But I love how that lit a fire under her and she got mad at that doctor, saying she had loved Hunter since he was just a little kidney bean and that she wasn't leaving her baby. You go, girl. And number 3, it goes to show that often it just takes one person who can help change the trajectory. And for Melissa, that was a nurse in the nursery who told her to look past the labels being put onto Hunter, look past the diagnosis, and see that he's still a baby. Baby who needs love, who needs food, and who needs you. And number 4, not to judge a book by its cover. Your baby, our kids, is a blessing. Just watch. And number 5, and finally, as I've said this many times before, and as Melissa said, find your people, find your tribe. There is no reason to be on this journey and to feel so alone. There are lots of people out there who want to be part of your journey and to share in your journey. Find your people. You'll be glad you did. Thanks for listening to the T21 Mom podcast. And if you liked today's episode, please share a little review and give a rating, as it helps us to be more searchable for others in the Down syndrome community. And tell others about us, because word of mouth is a powerful thing. Keep on loving on your rockin' kiddos, and I'll see you next time.